Hi, I'm Jason Duro. I'm a writer and I'm a reader. A lot of times, writers and readers get segmented separately, especially online, and I've seen this a lot on TikTok in particular, where a lot of readers feel like authors should not be active in booktok, that's a reader space. I certainly believe that there are reader spaces that authors shouldn't meddle in. For example, I wouldn't go and start trying to question people if they left a bad review for me on one of my books. I wouldn't go and meddle in my own review space. I feel like that's a space for readers. But would I go into other reader spaces to interact and talk with people about books that I read and books that I enjoy? You bet I would, and I do. Not every reader is a writer, but just about every writer is a reader. Stephen King said some things about being a reader as a writer in his book on writing, which I really recommend to everybody who's interested either in Stephen King or in being a writer yourself. It has some really great stuff in it. But what he said about being a reader as a writer was a little bit controversial, but I'll read it to you what he said. He said, "If you don't have time to read, you don't have the time or the tools to write." But he also said, "Every book you pick up has its own lesson or lessons, and quite often the bad books have more to teach than the good ones." So how true is that really? How important is it to read if you're a writer? I personally believe it's really important. A lot of writers that I know and some that I'm friends with do avoid reading while they're writing, and they especially avoid reading anything in the actual genre that they are currently writing in. And I understand that urge. I understand the notion that you don't want to influence yourself, you don't want to bring what you're reading into your writing and have it change your writing or influence it in some way. But I really kind of think that's a fallacy. I think that that's a wrong way to look at it. And I believe that when you don't allow yourself and you deny yourself the ability to read while you're writing, you are denying yourself access to some things that really could improve your writing and could make you a better and more successful author. There are a lot of theories and studies that have been done about how there actually are only X number of stories or Y number of plots that really exist, and that all stories can be distilled down into this really finite and specific number of existing plots that are archetypal. Things like the hero's journey or the quest or rags to riches or things like that. I don't really boil things down quite that far when I'm thinking about storytelling and creating stories, but I do think that every creative idea we have comes from somewhere outside of ourselves. I think that it comes from things that we've been exposed to, and it often comes from other media that we've consumed, things that we've read, things that we've watched. I think it comes to us in that way, and I think that the act of being creative and creating a story is less about creating something from nothingness in our brain and just having it come from nothing and just appear. And I think it's more about taking the things that we have consumed, the things that we've brought into ourselves, and combining different ideas in new and unique ways that are surprising to us, ways that we haven't thought of before, ways that are rarer. So I think that there is a lot of absorption that goes in as opposed to just creating something from nothingness. So in order for that creative process to work, we need to be able to open ourselves to receiving more things that we can recombine, more things that we can learn from, and more things that we can draw from internally. And I tend to think of my creative process as being kind of like an engine. I have a creative engine that runs inside me. And the thing that fuels that engine is all the other media that I consume. It's things that I read, things that I watch, games that I play, music that I listen to, podcasts that I listen to. It's all that stuff that I bring in. I'm filling up my tank so that my creative engine can run. And if I deny myself those things, if I don't have that fuel coming into me, then the engine can't run as efficiently. It can't output what I want it to output, and it'll just kind of leave me stuck there. The more stories you take in, the more your brain, and usually your subconscious, can process things and remix them and combine them and reorder them and then put them out into something that is unrecognizable to you, that doesn't seem like it really came from those things. It's something that you didn't expect to have as sort of a combination and remix of all those other things that you put in. Reading is also important for keeping you abreast of and informed about what's going on in the genre that you're writing in. Writing absolutely is a creative endeavor, but as soon as you start publishing, it becomes a business thing. And as with any kind of business that you go into, it's important to know what's going on in the market that you're doing business in. If you were designing cars for an auto manufacturer, for example, you would need to know what was going on at the other manufacturers. You'd need to know what colors of cars were in style, what the big trends were as far as features included, because that's how the market shapes up. That's what drivers are going to see when they come to buy cars and when they're comparing one car to another and seeing how their expectations are met. Similarly, as a writer, you're going to be in a market with a lot of other people who are writing in the same genre you're in. They're going to be writing the same kinds of books you are, and you need to know what they're doing so that your expectations and your awareness is set properly. Is enemies to lovers a big thing right now? Is found family something that readers are expecting? Those are things that you should know about the genre that you're writing in. It's important to know these kinds of things, not because you should let it dictate what you're writing. You should always write what you enjoy and what you want to write. But it could make you aware of things that could spark inspiration in yourself, and then in turn it could be marketable to more readers. You might be working on a book that you have created, that you've been writing for a while, and it doesn't have a particular trope in it, but maybe it's ripe for dropping that in there. Maybe there's an opportunity for something that you would enjoy writing about just as much, but you aren't aware that that is the hot thing right now, and you would be opening yourself to a whole new audience of readers if you included that found family trope, if you included that whatever trope, monster romance, I don't know. If you included something in there that people were clamoring for, and it wouldn't make a huge difference to the book you're already writing, why not drop it in there? And why not open yourself to all those readers and give them what they're looking for so that they'll be more likely to read and enjoy your story? And even aside from that, I'm a firm believer myself that reading widely, both inside and outside of your genre, will make you a better writer. I have learned so much about writing from just reading the authors that I love. And it also helps to read authors that you don't like as much, books that you can find problems with, that you can see ways to fix things that the author should have done something differently, and then you can incorporate that lesson into your own writing. And it's also great, like I said, to read people that you love and incorporate that in. For example, I am a longtime Agatha Christie fan. I've been reading her since I was little, and from her, I've learned so much about putting twists into stories, about how to sort of deceive the reader in a way that the reader enjoys it, and how to put red herrings into stories, how it's significant and important to lead the reader in one way when you're wanting them to look in this direction and you actually have something going on in that direction. I've learned from Elmore Leonard, the crime writer, I've learned about differentiating characterization and dialogue and having different voices among your characters and the importance and the value of that from him. There are so many writers that I've learned so much from just from reading their books. And I encourage everybody to avail yourself of that. It's lessons that you won't pick up from anywhere else. Now, as a writer, how can you read most effectively as a reader? The more you write, the more you're going to become aware of the tricks of writing and the tricks of storytelling. You're going to become aware of story structures. You're going to start seeing tropes for what they are in the story and why they work and how they are present and how they work and how they are not just trite things that don't work. You're going to be able to see how a B plot comes in and interweaves with the A plot to affect the pacing of the story in some way. You're going to become aware of all these things, and it's good to open yourself to those kinds of things. You will feel differently when you're reading a story or when you're watching something than you did before you were aware of all these things, and that's a good thing. It's good to open yourself up and kind of mentally deconstruct what you're watching or what you're reading. Become aware of how the author or creator put these things together, and you can even take notes as you go, or if you're someone who likes tabbing books as you read, that's a good way to do it as well. I don't personally do those things myself. I don't do it as formally, but I definitely am aware when I'm watching something of what kind of story it's shaping up to be, of what I expect the climax to be when it happens and where I expect it to happen, given the story structure that I've observed. So those kinds of things are really interesting to observe and to kind of try to reverse engineer it as you're watching it or reading it. And now, it is important not to go too far with the reading. If you spend all your time reading, then you won't have enough time to draft and edit your own stories, so you need to have a balance there. You need to work it out in some way. And there are a lot of ways that you can do that. You can track and record your reading somewhere like Goodreads or in a book journal. And another thing that I think could be really helpful is to form a book club with other authors so that all of you are reading the same books at the same time and you can have similar discussions with them. You can talk about how the stories are put together and talk about it from a craft level, as opposed to a different kind of book club where you might be talking about the themes in the book or whether you enjoyed it or other books that are similar. If you have a book club with other authors, you have a group right there who understands storytelling, who understands dialogue and characterization and all these things from a nuts and bolts perspective, and you can deconstruct the books and deconstruct the stories in a way that you can understand how they were made and how you can apply those lessons to your own writing. So I think that's a really good way to manage the process of reading. I personally am not in a book club myself right now. I've been really busy lately, so I've been sneaking in my reading where I can. But I think in concept, that's a really good idea that I'd like to do at some point. So, in summation, it's important to read widely as a writer, both inside and outside your own genre. It's very unlikely that reading is going to negatively affect you as a writer. It's more likely to give you the pieces you need to assemble your own stories and to remix and recraft them into your own stories and to inspire you. And reading will also educate you about the genre and the market that you're writing in, and overall, I believe it'll make you a better writer. Have you yourself already been reading any particular writers or books that have inspired you and made you feel like you're becoming a better writer? If so, drop them in the comments and let us know what you've been reading. And as always, feel free to like this video if it's helpful and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss any of my upcoming videos.